Welcome to the Whole Church Podcast.
Your favorite church unity podcast.
Probably.
If you want to hear from pastors,
Professors.
and everything in between,
Right, sure.
and, the occasional train talk.
Right, yeah. Have we got the podcast for you?
Hey everybody, welcome to the Whole Church Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Knoll, and your co-host, Tiberius Wallen, is here as well.
TJ. It's TJ.
No, it's Tiberius.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and we have a guest with us, Peter Enns. We're going to introduce in a second, but first, you're going to beg them for money?
Sure. Please, give us money. Consider supporting us on Patreon.
Yeah.
If you like what we're putting out here.
Yeah, and of course you can follow us on our Facebook page and Instagram. That's where we do most of our communicating with our audience and corresponding with you guys on what you guys would like us to hear from us or any feedback you guys have on how we can do this podcast better, because we're always looking to improve. Yeah.
Right.
Anything else we need to introduce for ourselves before we jump in?
We have a special announcement, but we'll save that for the end of the show.
Ooh, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was fun. All right, yeah, so y'all just keep listening. Y'all hear some great stuff later. But yeah, so we're here with Dr. Peter Enns, who's the host of his own podcast, The Bible for Normal People, which is a great podcast where he just kind of breaks down the Bible for normal people. Yeah. And he was a... Was it Harvard alumni? Was it?
Yeah, he graduated from Harvard.
Did you do your seminary at Harvard, or was that your bachelor's?
Oh no, I did a PhD at Harvard, and I did a bachelor's at Messiah College, which is a Christian college in central Pennsylvania. And and then I also have a Master of Divinity from Westminster Theological Seminary, which is also near where I live now in suburban Philadelphia.
Oh, wow. Do you like it in Philly? I've heard good things. Do you like it in Philly? Oh.
No, I don't like Philly. I'm from the New York City area, like Bergen County, New Jersey, so I grew up with New York sports. It's definitely a sports thing here. And Philadelphia sports fans are stupid, ignorant, and ridiculous. And that's just that's being nice and objective. So anyway, don't let anybody from Philadelphia hear this, because they're going to come to my house and probably kill me.
Duly noted.
If it helps, we live in Charlotte, and I hate Charlotte, so... Yeah, just
What's
good
wrong
times.
with Charlotte?
It is it's unnecessarily busy. Like, there's not a lot of really fun, good things here, but it's always busy. Like, the traffic's awful, the roads are awful, and it's just not my thing.
It's just too crammed.
Yeah, I like beaches, I like mountains, I like smaller towns. Or if I do go to a big city, I want there to be a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah,
just not my cup of tea.
I hear you. Yeah. That's cool.
But yeah, so...
Yeah, is there anything else the viewers or we should know about you?
I don't know. Like I said, I teach Bible at Eastern University, which is a Christian college just outside the city limits of Philadelphia, near Villanova University. People have heard of that. And probably if you haven't heard of Eastern University, you've probably heard of Tony Campolo. Who still teaches there, and he's alum as well. Shane Claiborne is another, and Brian Stevenson is probably, by far our most famous alum, who is doing a lot of work with racial reconciliation and justice in the court systems, and he's been on Oprah and stuff like that. So, So that's where I'm from, that little tiny school.
Wow, all right. Man, that's cool.
You are the third Peter we've had on this podcast.
We officially have more Peters than the Bible.
Well, we had Pete Link, and Peter Beck.
Yeah, they're both two of my old professors from Charleston Southern University.
Nice,
good guys. So yeah, so this will just be titled Third Peter.
Yeah, I'll try to. Yeah, right. I'll try to keep up. I'll try to keep up with the whole Peter tradition here.
The Peters are some of my favorites.
Yeah,
so far they're all just good, smart people.
I guess.
Yeah, man, it's good stuff.
I'll go with that.
So, what we like to do before we really jump to the meat of it, we like to start with an icebreaker question.
Ironic.
Interesting. The last person who tried an icebreaker game with me is now dead. Physically dead. I killed him. Just but go ahead. Please, go ahead.
All right, so TJ, do you want to do the icebreaker question?
So our icebreaker question for this show is, what is your favorite kosher animal? It doesn't have to be to eat.
Not your favorite to eat. Just
what's your favorite kosher?
I was thinking to myself, they can't ask me anything like that because, like, my two really bad experiences with icebreaker games was, what's your favorite farm animal? I'm like, after cow, I'm out of ideas because I grew up in a suburb. Or what's your favorite cloud formation? No, what cloud formation do you feel
We've
like?
done
right
that before.
Yeah, we've definitely asked that
I'm
cloud
like, I
question.
don't even know what they're called. I don't have the names of the cloud. I feel like an idiot, those. Anyway, so okay, my favorite kosher animal.
Kosher animal.
Oh,
We can go
gosh.
first, and it would make you feel better.
Yeah,
I
usually
wish
give you more
pig
time.
were kosher, but it's not.
It's
So,
it's the best though.
I don't know. I've never given that any serious thought. So, congratulations.
So,
What's yours?
My favorite kosher animal is a hippopotamus
Okay.
because they are kosher. It turns out.
Okay.
question:
Interesting.
Are
Isn't
sea
it?
turtles kosher?
No, they're not.
Man. Oh yeah, no reptiles.
No, it has to have scales and fins.
Yeah.
It lives in the water to be kosher.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, that is a tough. This is a tough question. I mean, I never thought about it. I was just stuck on hearing you say hippo, and then my brain didn't go there itself.
Does tuna have scales?
It does. Tuna has scales and fins.
Okay. I'll go with that then.
A
I
tuna.
do like tuna.
I love tuna.
Yeah. I'm
As
not
a
a big
bald
fish
eagle.
person. I once was almost to the point where I ate an eel.
Oh, wow.
That sounds great.
An eel. And
That
this
sounds
was in I was in Korea, and I don't speak Korean remotely.
I would have eaten an eel in Korea.
And I ordered something based on the picture in the menu, and it looked like a filleted trout or something. And it brought it to me, and it smelled really funny. And I was with my two South Korean hosts, and I looked at it, and I looked at them, and I said, "What is this?" and they sort of conferred with each other, and one of the hosts said, "Snake of the sea."
Snake of the
I
sea.
said, I ordered eel, so I just didn't eat it.
Mm.
Yeah,
I would've
horrible.
eaten it.
I'm a very picky eater, so.
Mm. But to answer your question, Joshua, no, bald eagles are not kosher because they're birds of prey.
See?
This is a really tough one. Are dogs kosher?
No.
What is kosher?
What is kosher? Anything that chews cud and has a split hoof is kosher.
Cow.
I'll say cow. I like burgers a lot.
All right.
Yeah.
That's the easiest answer I could possibly give, I feel like.
Only took you a long time to get there.
Yeah.
So now we can jump into the real questions that we actually.
Oh, that wasn't it? I thought the whole interview.
No, that
was
actually- yeah,
okay.
that was actually
That's the whole podcast.
Yeah, we
Thanks
just
for your
wanted to-
Yeah.
Oh,
No
man.
problem.
So, the first question is,
Well,
what's it like to be well known?
you're the most famous person we've had on the podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, definitely
Wow.
the only person who we can look up
I
and
really,
be greeted with a Wikipedia page.
I just
Okay.
I couldn't imagine having my own wiki page. That's just weird.
So
Yeah.
have you noticed it affect you in any way?
It probably does. I'm not trying to sound like, oh, shucks, guys. I just don't really. First of all, I'm not nearly as well known as most people that I interact with. Whether it's, Rachel Holt Evans, who just passed away recently, or people with, hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers. I just don't have that, So I'm sort of a lower tier person who happens to just write books and have a podcast and make some noise every once in a while and starts conversations that I think people want to be a part of. So, I guess what I'm saying is famous is relative, and I just don't think about it that way. And it sort of freaks me out when I go someplace and somebody actually recognizes me. That doesn't happen that often, but it has happened. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. How do you, oh, wait a minute. You listen to the podcast or something. So,
Yeah.
and I'm very conscious of the fact that Jesus doesn't need me.
Mm-hmm.
Needs none of us. So, it's fine. It's just, I get to do something and, you're at it long enough and people are going to notice. And so you're known by them, but it's still a very small slice of the human population.
So, does it make you feel weird that people can just look your name up and find out how many kids you have or something?
Not really. Because what do I care? I mean, that doesn't. I'm not concerned about that. I mean, I don't have like my bank account information or anything, on there. So it's like, I want you to know I have a wife and 3 kids. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I have a wife and 3 kids, adult children, but people generally know the town that I live in. It's there someplace, and what courses I teach at Eastern, and what books I've written, and I try to be pretty transparent anyway. I don't like to have an online or public persona that's really that much different from the one that I have with my friends and family. And I really do like the fact that people, when they meet me or when they read my books and then they meet me, they say, yeah, I can't really tell the difference. When I read your book, I can hear your voice, or, you're talking to me now the way you post things on Twitter or blog. And I think to me that's very important, because it's about authenticity,
being yourself,
being genuine. Yeah. Why not? I mean, why not be yourself?
Man, well, I feel like that also keeps people from doing the gotcha thing. Like, I read your book, but you're not really like that.
Right. Yeah, because if that's perceived as hypocritical, people will maybe want to point that out to you. Sometimes they'll point it out because they're actually helpful. Other times they point it out just because they're people of ill will, and you have to sort of do that. So probably the hardest thing about this is it's disconcerting to me how many people there are really of ill will out there who hang out in like Christian kinds of conversations. And it's not people who disagree with you. It's not like disagreement. It's not even strong disagreement or, Enns, I think you have a screw loose. It's not that. It's people who really just are full of animus. They're just really angry people who probably need to have several therapists on retainer just to get them through the day, But that's the thing. It's like, man, you're really nasty here. Like, why are you doing this? So, but there's a delete button, or a hide button. So I have to do that every once in a while. But, apart from that, it's not bad.
All right. So it doesn't affect you very much at all to be sort of famous.
I don't think so.
Cool.
I don't think it does. And maybe deep down, there are things happening to me that I'm not conscious of. And I'm totally on board with that, because, we're not always aware of ourselves all the time, all the way through, So I try to keep, I just try to stay attentive to what's going on in me, and try to always turn the finger back pointing at me, so to speak. Not like, what's wrong with those people out there? But, why is this affecting you this way? Oh, you don't like being challenged, do you? Well, why don't you like being challenged? Because of your ego. So then you sort of turn it back to yourself, and it becomes more of a healing and restorative moment, So even the negative stuff has, I think, a positive effect.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Man.
Hopefully we can find out one day.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Man, which I guess kind of leads us to the big question, I guess you'd say.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. You wrote a paper back in, I think it was 2008.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. What was it?
That was, what was the title of the paper?
Ooh,
I know it had to do with Genesis. And it was what Westminster, that they voted on and had you, what was it? Was it suspended? Yeah. Over certain beliefs, because some pastors didn't want to send their people from their congregation to the seminary, and there's a whole big mess about the paper.
It was Inspiration and Incarnation, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the book. Oh, yeah.
That
book came out in 2005, but that so-called controversy came to a head in 2008. Okay. Now I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Got it.
Gotcha, yeah. That's what we're, seeing as how we're all about church unity and all, it was really grabbed my attention how, even through all the voting process, everybody seemed to kind of be split on where they stood on this, and the whole suspending someone over their belief seems very not church unity to me. Very...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you have to think of it this way, that there's unity. I mean, the other side would argue exactly the way you're arguing, that we need unity, but part of that unity is theological unity. And, you know, the school where I taught, Westminster, has a particular tradition that it defines as it defines it, but it's a particular kind of Calvinist tradition that they want to protect and to uphold and to maintain. And the perception was that things that I was writing were not doing that, right? So the things that I think every institution, every movement has parameters, has boundaries. And I was perceived by a minority of the faculty, and at first a minority of the board, as probably crossing the line, but then politics got the way it went, and you know, things got a little bit more tense, let's say, over about a 2-3 year period. But the real battle there at Westminster was more who gets to write the narrative of that tradition. Because in defense of inspiration and incarnation, we meaning the majority of the faculty, we produced a very lengthy paper simply citing chapter and verse of our tradition of people who were saying very similar, if not identical, things to what I was saying in that book, Inspiration and Incarnation. But, you know, as we all know, who gets to tell the story, who gets to tell the history is the winners. Yeah. And that's sort of what happened. That's more. So I think, you know, to sort of cast that in a framework of church unity, sort of in an abstract sense, won't get at what's really there. It's more who gets to define the tradition. But then more importantly, and this is maybe where unity comes into it, not only who gets to define the story, who gets to define the tradition, who gets to define the history, but how do you address fellow brothers and sisters who you perceive as not being not supporting that? Like, do you slander them? Do you work back channels to try to get them far? In other words, do you get political, or do you rise to another level and try to, you know, address it differently? You know, that's the question there, and I think that's unfortunately prevalent in a lot of Christian institutions, that especially those that have a history of equating gospel fidelity with fighting. And there's a lot of that. That's largely, you know, the history of American fundamentalism, and Southern Baptists are known for that. Neo-Calvinists are known for that, and other people as well, other groups. And that's, you know, that's just the way it is sometimes. And, you know, I left. I wasn't fired. I resigned. I resigned in my mind 3 or 4 months before it became public that I did resign. Yeah. Just because I could see that this is going nowhere, and I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And I tell you, I'm glad that I did. You know, it was a great decision, and it's given me a lot of perspective. And now that's about 11 years ago, and I'm thankful. You know, I'm thankful for where I am.
Yeah. So it's not all bad things. It wasn't just like this horrible split from your university or your seminary. It was more or less amicable.
Well, no, not really.
No.
It was not amicable, but only on paper was it amicable. But, you know, that's how these things usually go. And when people ask me, did you get fired or did you resign? I usually say, I got resigned. In other words, I could see where it was going.
And I was to quit.
Yeah. Well, I knew where it was going. It was very obvious to me because I didn't think that I would really get justice in where what I'm saying would be really looked at with a
fair gaze.
Yeah, with a fair gaze. I really, I'm not imagining that I was hardly alone in coming to that determination. Yeah, and especially, you know, you have a tradition there that began in the 1920s as a belligerent movement to separate from liberal Presbyterians. And that's part of the DNA of the school, that, you know, to be a faithful Christian means to seek out enemies, foreign or domestic, and destroy them. That's how you're a soldier. You know, that's how you're faithful. And, you know, destroy, I mean that metaphorically, not physically, obviously. But
no more crusades.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just sort of emotional or professional crusades, but not physical ones. So, you know, and that's part of that tradition. and that's the way it is. And, I mean this in the most positive way that I can put it. I'm glad that I'm no longer a willing accomplice in a tradition that exists to correct other Christians. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not just this little school that did that. It's endemic in a lot of, I think, American or Western ecclesiastical contexts.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. Yeah.
A lot of fear, of protecting the fort. There's a lot of fear, like we have to protect at all costs, and we can't change. There's no evolution in thinking, which I actually think is intellectual idolatry. I think if you're dealing with the infinite God, you will change what you think. So. Yeah.
I can see that. I think I can agree to that. That was and it is interesting. There's nothing wrong, I don't think, with correcting others or stating your opinion.
Sure.
But it's weird how it's almost like, like you said, like militant. Like, oh, how dare you think that when we think this? Almost kind of deal. And they seek it out and try and, nip it in the bud, as Barney would say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Great show. But I think the experience I had at Harvard with Jewish professors and sort of learning things from them was very helpful to me exactly for that reason, because after I graduated from Harvard, I went to teach at Westminster, and within a year or so, I came back to Harvard with a couple of my colleagues for a conference on Judaism and like the study of the Bible, and some of my old professors spoke there. But I remember like hearing this lecture, and somebody's lecturing, and afterwards for Q&A, one guy gets up and he goes, "You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. It's blah, blah, blah." And another guy gets up and says, "No, you shut up. You're not crazy. He's crazy. You're not crazy." And basically, but you see, at the end, they all walked out arm in arm and had lunch.
Fascinating.
Because that's just how you can actually go after people's ideas without having it taken personally.
Without attacking them.
Well, right. And the thing is that, my experience at least is with, I'm not sure evangelicals or Christians in general do it that way. No, it's more you get stabbed in the back 6 months later in a journal article where they didn't, like, you had no idea what these people were thinking. They didn't just air it out. And I think, I've often wondered what the psychology of that is, but,
can you even,
it's like attack journalism.
Can you really call those people Christian?
Well, that's not for me to say. I've got my own problems. And,
it's just...
I think you can. They're just not... The
mindset of trying to stab people. That's just... I don't know the people. I can't say, but it doesn't seem like a Christian
It's above my
mindset.
Pay grade to make that conclusion. I just think that we all are dysfunctional people, and we all have things to work on. And the bigger problem behind it is not being aware enough to look at yourself. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. The thing that I've sort of grown to see over the past 10, 15 years.
It's actually really cool to
Richard Rohr, I like Richard Rohr. I don't know if you guys get it, but he said something. I didn't see this in a book, but I heard it in a lecture. This was like at least 10, 11 years ago. He said the difference between religion and like a good, healthy spirituality, he'd call it, is that religion is always looking outside and saying, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with them? What's wrong with them? In the spiritual journey, all that stuff is turned inward towards yourself. What am I learning here about myself by how I'm reacting to this? And when I heard that, I said, wow, why didn't anybody ever tell me this? That makes so much sense. It's not just we're right. Everybody thinks they're right. We're right, and the enemy's out there. We have to change them. Man. And Calvinism is particularly, at least narrow sort of neo-fundamentalist Calvinism is more prone to thinking that way. And they have a lot of brain power to back that up, but they still think that way. And again, Southern Baptists, not all of them. I know people who are Southern Baptists who hate what has happened to the Southern Baptist denomination. But as a system, it's very biblicistic, very proof text oriented with complex layers of apologetics around everything. And, that's the tough tribe to sort of be a part of. And, and looking in on their own failings is just it just doesn't come up, at least publicly. It's like, well, we know we're right. Now let's go talk about. We'd really like to talk to you about this problem. As long as you realize we're right and you're wrong, and you have to change.
Mm-hmm. It's very prideful, almost.
Yeah.
It is. I still root it in fear. I mean, I don't want to sort of reduce everything to that, but I think fear of you've been taught your whole life that your spiritual existence is about being right, and it's about being certain about what you know. And once you achieve that, you don't want to let go of it if your whole spiritual life is wrapped up in that. So I think people react belligerently sometimes just because they're afraid. And I understand that too. You know, who hasn't done that?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I even had a personal friend who I remember talking to about some of the Genesis stuff. Sort of a lot of what you wrote about, like whether Adam's historical character, anything like that. And I actually remember it was weird. He was just really honest and went, "I'm not comfortable thinking about this. If this isn't true, then how do I know anything I believe is true?" And it was just so weird because it's a lot of people are there. I think where it's scary to think outside of what you've always been taught. Yeah.
Right, and for people like that, like you don't drop a bomb on them and force them to think through it. If they're not ready to think through stuff, then they're not ready. God loves them anyway. You know, it's like they're not bad people. It's just we all have our psychologies, we all have our backgrounds, we all have our experiences, and it's not for everyone to sort of be dumped on. Like, you know, I teach college students. I don't dump on 18-year-olds my latest thought of, you know, synthesizing, you know, all of Christian theology or something. I just, that's not fair to them. You know, they're at a different place. So I want to affirm them where they are, but also help them see that there's a lot of room to grow here in the Christian faith. And sometimes people are ready for that, and sometimes they're not. And you have to sort of know the difference and work within that. And basically it's about respecting and loving other people, right?
Mm-hmm. You have to accept what they are, and not just try to destroy them to build them into what you want. That doesn't help us.
It doesn't help anything. We all like to be respected for where we are.
I mean, especially with the issues like Genesis, where, and as far as I'm aware, it's good to think about, it's good to study, it's good to know this stuff and have the conversations, know what you believe. But at the end of the day, I don't think it impacts your salvation whether or not Adam was historical or not. I think what Jesus did what impacts salvation. If we can get them there, then we can talk about the other stuff after.
Yeah, I agree. Although the problem is that for some varieties of Christianity, all those questions are locked into each other. And if you, quote, deny that Adam is a historical person, you're just on a slippery slope. Yeah. Why accept anything? And I'm like, okay, that's a good question. That's called theology and hermeneutics. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what biblical interpretation means and how you treat different genres of literature differently. You have different expectations, and how not every part of the Bible is created equal. Mm-hmm. There are things that are frankly more important for the Christian faith than other things. But it takes time to get into that kind of stuff. You know, not everybody is willing to have that conversation. And some people I know are just beautiful people who don't think.
Right.
And that's fine. You know, my job is not to turn them into me.
I think,
I've definitely been that person.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I would say about that particular thing is just, would like to point out, there's a reason one of the logical fallacies is titled the slippery slope fallacy. Mm-hmm. That doesn't work. But anyway, so I know we spent a lot of time on that whole topic. It's big stuff. But we did actually, originally, I got your content from Dr. Richard Friedman, yeah. And, because I read a lot. I read his books when I see them. Mm-hmm. Not actually that prevalent when I see them, but one of my favorite reads was Who Wrote the Bible, and he did that.
Oh, yeah.
So I was recently reading, he had his Exodus book. I found your podcast where you're going through Exodus, and y'all just are destroying the book of Exodus for me, making me rethink everything. So thanks, guys.
Hey, that's not our fault. That's the fault of people who taught you. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, don't put that guilt trip on me, pal. You know, it's not my fault that you were taught wrong things.
Didn't know what it was.
It's not my fault that you were taught to skip over obvious things in the text if you take a moment just to read it. Sorry, I'm being snarky, but you know.
His book was great, and I reached out to him, and I think his the only reason wasn't going to be on the podcast is he wasn't Christian himself, and I was like, we don't care. We just want to talk about certain issues. Yeah. The one thing I originally reached out to, and I was also hoping to be able to talk to you about, is and he mentions it in his book too. There's almost kind of this scholastic religion divide, where like people in the religion are like, oh, this is a sacred text, and as such, we don't want to hear the scholar stuff on it because they're questioning what we're kind of locked into here. And it's almost like the two sides sometimes, where they should work together, don't always work together. Like what he was pointing out was, it was a very interesting thing in the book, the Exodus. He said, if we didn't have the Bible, if we had all the other stuff first, and all of a sudden we dug up the Bible, we would be using that as, hey, this is what all this stuff we've been finding is. Yeah. But because we've had it first, and it's become this whole religion, we naturally assume, oh, no, that's not necessarily what happened. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like because we had it first, we don't use it the same way we could be. And it was just a weird perspective for me, where I was like, oh, man, I never even thought of that. Does that sort of divide between religious people and, those in the religion scholar, do you think that affects our ability to practice the religions as effectively as we could?
Well, it can, I think, and it has, and it does. I don't think it has to. But you see, here's my 30,000 foot view kind of answer to that question. The religious traditions that we adhere to, whether it's some form of Protestantism or anything else, those religious traditions got their. Let's just stick with Protestantism, because I'm guessing most of your listeners are probably Protestant. I'm Protestant, right? Yeah. That stuff got its start long before the modern period began, when people weren't aware of things like geological evidence or, evolution or any of the challenges from like the 19th century and 18th century. That's when it was sort of easy, so to speak, to read the Bible and say, well, I guess this is basically just giving us history without questioning it. It's scientific and archaeological and geological discoveries that started in the 18th century that really made people stop and say, there's this story of a flood. It's from the Babylonians, and it's older than our story. Okay, what are you going to do with that? You see, we have questions and challenges that have been raised in the modern period that were not there beforehand. And we're living in a different sort of moment in history. And there is tension between those two. And I think, though, what people, and this is anecdotal, but what I'm perceiving is that like more people are willing to understand that the Bible is worthy of more than simply treating it as a simplistic sort of history book. Yeah. But that it's complex, it's theological, it's written at different times, different places for different reasons, and therefore different messages. And we can't fault people for Genesis 1, and thinking like ancient people when they talk about the creation of the cosmos, right? Or thinking that there must be two original humans, because we know that when, a man and a woman, they do it, and then they have a baby. Like everybody comes from two. So the whole human race had to begin with two. That's logical, we know better now, so to speak, scientifically, but that's what they thought. And I don't look at that and say, oh, what quaint little ancient dumb people. I say, no, they're talking about God in their world within the limitations of their context. And I talk about God within the limitations of my context. One of the limitations that modern people have is that we tend to think that everything is rational and analytical and give me evidence. How many times have I heard people say, I need evidence for the existence of God? That's a very modern thing. That's a limitation, as far as I'm concerned, of the modern world. Because what if God is not an object out there that you have evidence for? What if God is not even a being? What if God is being? What if God is the ground of being, which is like theologians talk like that, and the Orthodox Church has talked like that? What if that's the reality? And what if your modern worldview is keeping you from seeing that possibility? I just think you're limited. You're not rational for saying, I don't believe in God because there's no evidence. It's just you're asking a question that is beneath the dignity of the topic that you're discussing. We all have limitations. I have limitations. I don't even know what they are half the time.
Right.
That's just being human, And yet God works with that, I think.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I've been told by my fiance before that sometimes just me breathing's my limitation.
You're right.
It just depends on the day.
Yeah, I honestly think one of our biggest limitations as humans in the modern time is that we think we know things.
We know so much.
Like 300 years ago,
we
didn't think cells existed. Was it 400 years? Yeah, we didn't know cells existed. So, really, anything we know is just could be disproven within 100 years because of something new we discovered.
Well, and that's what's interesting. The scholarly religious divide for me, just personally. When I went to UNCW, the public school, we had a class called The Bible as Literature, and I was forced to, for the purpose of the class, to read the Bible, all the different books, as literature. So for me, the first time ever, I'm looking at it not as a history book, not as every single thing is literally fact, and I was like, wow, this, just removing that one limitation opened up so much more of the scripture, and I'm like, wow, that's just crazy. It was something that was scholarly that I think affected me big spiritually, just because I allowed it to.
Taking it seriously as literature helps us see the theology of the texts at the end of the day, too. I mean, the literature is the vehicle by which the theology is communicated. And understanding more and more of the nature of that ancient literature helps us understand more and more of its theology. And whatever it is, it's not modern history. It just isn't.
It also makes it a lot more interesting to read it as literature. At least for me, it did.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I know it is.
Yeah.
Especially towards the end. Reading Revelations as a book.
Yeah, it's just
wild.
Even if you're not a Christian, just reading through, seeing some of the parallels and different things they're able to write into it, you're like, man, that was it's good literature. If nothing else, it is good literature.
It's well constructed, using sort of a reservoir of ideas and symbols and weaving that together. And these are symbols and metaphors that people in the ancient world understood. They got it. They could already appreciate, let's say, the literary element there, like in the book of Revelation, that it's sometimes hard for modern people, if we're like really rationalistic and evidence-based and everything else, that's where you get people saying like, well, these locusts in the book of Revelation, they must be helicopters.
Well, right? That's just true.
Or that's weird, but that's the modern mindset, because everything here must correspond to reality as we know it. Right? So there's a line twice in the book of Revelation. It also happens in Psalm 2 that God will punish with a rod of iron. There's a church about an hour north of me. It was founded by Reverend Moon's son. Remember, he's the sort of the Korean cultish kind of quasi-Christian leader, but his son is starting this church. And it's a church that advocates being armed and loaded and being ready for any time you have to defend yourself.
Praise God.
Yeah.
And it's the rod of iron. That's their proof text, because it's in the Bible, and rod of iron must mean guns.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's the limitation of having to rationalize ourselves again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Personally, the church I'm going to found will just be the rod of iron church. It's like just pieces of iron. So sometimes baseball bats.
Although that name's been taken by above-mentioned church, so just be careful, because they may come after you for taking their name. I'd hate for that to happen.
You can't do that. All Bible are going to start being printed with trademark after that phrase. Yeah.
We'll be the rods of iron of Revelations.
Yeah.
Oh, man. But so what, getting back on topic a little bit, with that whole scholastic religious kind of divide that we've created, what can people do to kind of bridge it for themselves? Like, average Joe listening is like, you know what? I want to see the scholastic side of my own beliefs, so I can kind of bridge that and grow as a person. How does he do that? Does he have to sign up to go to a college and pay all that money, or is there a way for him to just see the scholastic side?
That's a great question, and I think it's not easy, but I think institutions are rising up that help people with that. And for example, things like, research some podcasts that you like, and pick 5 or 6 or 7. Well, yeah, if they want to. I mean, I hope they do, but that might not be for everybody. That might be too far down the road for some people, or not far enough down the road for others. But, everybody has their niche. And there are people out there talking about that very thing who are actually struggling with the engagement of our faith, which is rooted in an ancient story and an ancient text in a modern situation. That is not a new question. That's almost the history of the last 200 years of biblical scholarship trying to work through that kind of an issue. So the resources are there. I also want to suggest to people that, I think reading the Bible is very, very important, but read a Bible. First of all, read a translation that maybe isn't apologetically oriented, like trying to defend things. And I do usually recommend, no translation's perfect, but I use the New Revised Standard Version, which has its issues, because they all do, but it has far fewer issues than some other translations that I don't think do as good a job dealing fairly with some things that come up in translation issues. But not just the Bible itself, the translation, but also a study Bible. I think study Bibles are amazing resources because not only do they have footnotes at the bottom explaining terms and explaining, here's what's going on in this chapter, but they have charts and maps. And really good study Bibles have at the end, they have, I have 2 study Bibles that have about 100 pages of essays. Yeah. Of every topic that might interest you. What's the relationship between the New Testament and the Old Testament? That's a great thing to read about. You can get a Bible college or seminary education for about $40. you just buy a good study Bible and you can learn an awful lot from that stuff.
So do you have one you would recommend?
I have a couple. The one that I use 3 of them sort of interchangeably depending on just what mood I'm in. But the New Interpreter Study Bible is one that I use. The HarperCollins Study Bible. Actually, I'm going to give you 5. The New Oxford Annotated Bible. These are all New Revised Standard Version. And then also the Jewish Study Bible, which is obviously just the Christian Old Testament, but some of the notes there are just amazing notes that just really help, that point out things from the text, because they use Hebrew too. With English letters, and they explain what it means. They don't assume you know Hebrew, but they dig into the text in ways that Protestant Bibles don't always do. And all those things have essays in the back, which are amazing. The 5th one that might interest people is, there's a Jewish Study Bible, which is the Christian Old Testament, which is the Hebrew Bible. But there's also a Jewish annotated New Testament. And I think it's actually called the Jewish Annotated New Testament, the New Revised Standard Version, but the footnotes are from a Jewish perspective to basically help Gentiles who read this stuff realize that the stuff that Jesus and Paul says, it really is rooted in the Jewish world at the time. And I think that's fascinating to know. And plus they have essays in the back there too that I think are very illuminating. Doesn't mean I don't agree with everything I read in the notes or I don't agree with everything I read in the essays, but that's totally irrelevant. They make you think, and it's stuff there. And if it's something you're not sure about, just keep going. Don't worry about it. People aren't always right. But those are really, really good resources, I think, for just having maps in the back. And you're reading through something in Exodus, and where is this place? Where is Moab? Where are these places? And
I've done that
and you
while
find
listening
it.
to your podcast, actually. I just sat there with a map going, okay, that's what he's talking about.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. The whole Midian thing, right? Is that what you're talking about? The Midian, or the location of Mount Sinai or something?
I think so. One of the newer episodes, right?
Yeah.
A few weeks, yeah. But, I do have one, while we're on Bibles, one last question on that, just because I'm curious. Have you ever read the New Jerusalem Bible?
Yeah. I mean, I don't use it, but I have it. I have a copy of it.
It's not a study Bible, but it's really interesting just for like how it translates for the purpose of making it read like the literature. And it's like, okay, I think it's fascinating. Right. I liked it a lot.
Well, and while we're on that, Robert Alter, who is a Jewish scholar, for about the past 25 years, he spent translating the entire Old Testament Hebrew Bible from Hebrew into English. And he does exactly what you just said. He translates things in such a way that preserves puns, for example, which always get lost in English translations.
The puns in the Psalms are great.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or even like in narratives and stories, like, in the story of David, it uses this word here, and 3 chapters later, the same word occurs in Hebrew. And you really are to think of what's the connection between these two stories. But you don't get that in English translations. Those things usually get obscured, right? Yeah. Yeah. And that's why if you're not going to learn Greek or Hebrew, which you're not, most people are not going to do that. And even if you do, it's a lifetime of struggling with it and really trying to understand it. You have study Bibles that are compiled and written and edited by people who did do that.
Yeah.
And you can benefit from it.
Oh, yeah. We'll see if we can get a link to all of those 5 study Bibles you mentioned.
Yeah, and also the Robert Alter translation. That's a really good one to get to, I think.
We'll see if we can put all those on our Facebook post for this episode.
Yeah. And you should, when you're done with Exodus, definitely consider doing the Puns of Psalm as an episode of Bible for Normal People. I'd love to listen to it.
Oh, really?
That'd be great. I think it'd be fun. There's some funny stuff.
Uh-huh. You have to pay us if you use that idea, though.
Yeah. No, just at the end, just a trademark culture podcast. Oh man! But so what will happen as more people start using study Bibles and start trying to bridge that gap? What will happen?
Maybe I think people would just become a little less on high alert for things that they're not used to hearing about the Bible. I mean, one thing I like about the Jewish study Bible, for example, is like, especially when you're in the Pentateuch, and it says something in Exodus, and the comments like, what Moses says here contradicts what Moses says in Leviticus. And you're like, oh my goodness gracious, no. But then you actually go look at those 2 passages, and you're like, well, by golly, they're right. But that makes you, and when you see that, hopefully the response will be, okay, I need to sort of take a step back. And, frankly, I joke with my students, welcome to adult Bible reading. You're now reading the Bible as an adult, which is what you're supposed to be doing, and which I think the Bible is meant to be doing. It's not a children's book. It's not a youth group book, although the gospel is, Jesus is, the Christian faith is. The Bible itself is not meant to be mined for your favorite verses to justify what you think you ought to be doing. It's literature, like you said. It's theology. It's history. It's prophecy in the biblical sense of the word, not so much telling the future, but proclaiming something about God. It's songs, it's weird apocalyptic stuff like the book of Revelation. It's biographies like the Gospels. There's so many different kinds of literature written at different times. To sort of wrap your arms around that takes, there's a reason why there are seminaries. There's a reason why there are yeshivas. This is not the easiest stuff to read and wrap your arms around, and we shouldn't make believe that it is. And there's no perfect place to start that journey of study. Start anywhere. Get a good study Bible. Pick any book of the Bible you want to read. And then read the introductory essay introducing that book, Jeremiah or Psalms or Colossians or whatever. And then what I do is this. I read a chapter or a section of a chapter if the chapter is long. Like sometimes you have divisions, right? Like subheadings that people make up. I don't think they should be there, but there are. So I take a section or a chapter, and then I read it, and then I go and read the notes. I said, oh, man, I missed that entirely. That's a really good point, and which will make me go back and underline things in the biblical text itself. And I like that sense of discovery and curiosity about what's the Bible, rather than thinking I already know what it says. I want to talk to other people about it.
So the average person can be intentional about finding out what the Bible says.
Oh, absolutely.
Also, there's good commentaries too. There's one thing I personally, I don't know if you've read it before. It's Psalms by the Day by Alec Monier. It's like a devotional, but also a commentary on the Book of Psalms.
Oh, good. No, I'm not familiar with that, but that sounds great.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a way of like not making this
it's really
like you're going to
but
school.
Also
Spiritually
doable.
nurturing. Yeah, sure.
It's the Bible for normal people.
Yeah,
it's good stuff. Yeah, but that's good stuff. But man, we really appreciate your time and all the input on that and how we can kind of start to look at bridging some of those gaps and have better unity across scholarship and laity. Is that how you say that? Laity?
Yeah, that's a good word, yeah. Or normal people.
Yeah, for normal people.
Right.
Yeah. So, the last thing we do for the podcast, we like to just talk about our God moment of the week, which is basically anything God's challenged us with, anything, we've felt inspired by, any just good prayer moment, anything that spiritually has happened in the last week that we've experienced. We just like to share for our listeners and
sure.
Yeah, just to keep everybody in touch with what we're doing, and also I think looking for those moments just benefits. It's benefited us to just kind of look at our lives more, honestly. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a whole spiritual practice around that called the examine. Where at the end of the day you take stock of your day and stuff like that. But I think probably a recent sort of thing for me that I just feel really good about is I found an app. Okay, I always am. I struggle with like the discipline of prayer and just like not in a sense like I have to do something so God likes me, but just starting a day more quietly. Even just for 5 or 10 minutes. And I've tried a lot of things that are just hard for me to do, but there's a wonderful app, and a friend of mine pointed this out to me, and I said, why didn't I know this before? It's called Pray As You Go. And it's about, each lesson is about 10 minutes long, and there's some music in there. It's in the background. It's usually beautiful church music of some sort, international, global church music. So Africa and all sorts of places. But also there's a Bible reading and a lesson, but also meditative questions that are asked. And this is, if you knew me, you'd know how unusual this is. I actually look forward to starting my day that way. Oh. It's not really a chore. It's like, this is like a nice quiet time that's sort of, it does something spiritually that syncs with my personality as opposed to some other things that don't sync as much, So that's something that has been very encouraging the past, I guess, week or so.
Nice. That's very good. Yeah, that sounds great, actually. Maybe I should look at that.
That does sound fantastic. Which, I'll just go ahead and use this opportunity to say next week, or the next week after we release this, we'll have Donald Whitney on the podcast, I know him from his book, Praying the Bible, so it's all about starting the book with the day off with prayer and using the Bible to do that, so that's really fascinating.
Cool.
Yeah. Did you want to go next, TJ?
Sure, I can go next. My God moment for the past week actually happened today.
Me too.
I'm a pretty simple guy. And I just really like to appreciate God's majesty in nature. And today we were camping. We woke up on a mountain, hiked down, and we never went to the top, so we never got to see all of Charlotte from the top of Pinnacle Mountain. But on the way back down from our campsite, I just was almost overwhelmed by the beauty of this random spot next to the path. Yeah, and it was really incredible to be able to see something that I thought was so just amazing. And it's nothing special at all.
You know what I'm really excited about with my God moment? It's also going to be the train talk of the day. Yeah. Right. We do this thing every now and then where we just like to talk about trains, which is great. For my God moment was this morning. I woke up at like 5 in the morning, something like that, and I just was not feeling good at all. And TJ and our other friend, Mikey, shout out to Mikey if he ever listens to this, they stayed in the tent. They were asleep. And I was just out there, and I just got to where I was just feeling sad, and I had no idea why. I was like, God, why am I so sad right now? And I just kind of prayed about it. I was like, man, God, if you could just do something to uplift my spirits, that'd be great, because I just don't want to be sad for no reason.
That train was at 5 a.m.?
Yeah, heard the whistle blow, and I was like, wow, trains. Yeah, I do feel better.
Yeah, I heard that.
I just immediately felt better after that.
Yeah, I heard that.
it was great for me. So my godmother was also trained.
Alright.
Yeah.
2 words, 1 song.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so remember, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook.
Oh yeah, and Patreon. We need money because, big announcement, drum roll please.
That's too loud for the microphone.
Yeah, that would be bad. But
when we get to 20 Patreon subscribers, Joshua is going to wax his beard, and we're going to film it.
Yeah, we'll film
and
it.
I am going to shave my head.
Yeah, that is, so let everybody know to subscribe to Patreon. Mm-hmm. It'd be great.
We are at 6 right now.
If Tiffany is one of those 20 subscribers, I think I'll let her be the one who waxes the beard.
All right.
I think she'd love to be the cause of that.
But that is our special announcement. You will get to watch us mutilate ourselves.
It'll be fantastic.
If
so yeah, just
you convince other people to pay us money.
Oh man, some future guests, Donald Whitney, which I already mentioned.
Donald
I'm
Whitney.
really excited. He's one of my favorite
Judy
authors.
Knoll. Let's see.
Sister Sylvia Staten.
Becky Walker again. Oh yeah,
Brother McLaughlin.
Brother McLaughlin, Brother Jeff White.
Yeah. And of course, at the end of season 1.
Lance Skipper. Francis Chan. Francis Chan will be on our show at the end of season 1.
He just doesn't know it yet.